Good evening, Cicely. Chris in the morning here, broadcasting to the sleepless, the sentimental, and anyone who's ever watched their reflection move after they stopped. Every culture's got its own version of this night. Some light candles for the dead, some wear masks to confuse them, and some just build a fire and tell stories until the dark feels a little less empty. Maybe that's what Halloween really is. A kind of cultural campfire passed down through centuries. We dress up the fear, wrap it in story, and in doing so, we tame it. I once read that ghost stories aren't really about being scared. They're about remembering that we're temporary. It's an old ritual, to gather close when the nights get long and trade warmth for wonder. Up here in Alaska, we understand that better than most. The nights stretch out like a long hallway, and the wind carries more than weather. So tonight, I thought I'd share a few stories from Cicely's past. Not about monsters or curses, but about what lingers. The people and places that don't quite let go. Because Halloween isn't really about the dead coming back. It's about the living remembering how thin the line really is. Let's start with one I like to call Gold in the Dark. You've probably heard bits of this one, the story of Silas Cobb and Clara Van Dorn. It's one of those old Cicely tales that gets told in quiet voices, especially when the wind comes in from the river. Silas was a prospector back in 1911, the kind of man who thought the mountain owed him something if he just kept digging long enough. Clara was a school teacher. She kept her hopes small, her house tidy, and her love patient. The summer before he vanished, Silas brought her one small gold nugget, told her it was a promise, just a speck of what's waiting. She wore it in a locket around her neck. When he left for one last run before the freeze, he said he'd be back before the first snow. The snow came early. They found his camp in the spring, tools frozen where he dropped them, his tent half buried in snow. There were boot prints leading out across the river ice, and then they just stopped halfway. Clara moved into a small cabin by the water, not far from where they found him. Folks in town said she kept a lamp burning in the window every night, long after everyone else had gone to sleep. Some nights, she'd walk the trail up to the cemetery and back again, lantern in hand. No one ever saw her leave town. But one winter morning, the sheriff found her down by the riverbank, her lantern beside her, the glass blackened with soot. That was over a century ago. And last night, Ed Chigliak swears he saw a lantern moving through the fog in that same stretch of woods. He said it came from the direction of the cemetery, floating low and steady. He followed it, thinking maybe someone was lost, but the light moved against the wind, slow, deliberate. Each time he stopped, it stopped. When he called out, the light paused, then turned toward him, like it was listening. Ed said the fog around it glowed gold, like sunlight through whiskey. He followed it down to the clearing where the old Cobb cabin used to stand. The light drifted right through the collapsed wall. No sound, no flicker, and vanished. He came back at dawn. The snow was smooth except for one patch of soft, damp earth beneath the timbers. There he found a rusted lantern frame, a small gold locket, and a brittle envelope sealed in wax.
October 31st, 1912. To the man I loved. If you find this, know I waited by the light. The river took you, but I've walked its edge each night, carrying the gold you placed in my hand. The flame is all I have left of you. Tonight I'll follow it wherever it leads. If it swallows me too, maybe it will bring us together in the dark. Clara.
That's where it ends. Ed said the paper should have crumbled, but it didn't, and that just before the lantern vanished into the cabin, he thought he saw another figure beside it, tall, thin, moving the same way. When he went back the next morning, there were 2 sets of prints leading from the river to the cemetery, and none coming down. Maybe love's just the kind of gold the living keep digging for. Buried too deep for daylight, but bright enough to shine through the dark. Strange thing about stories like that one, they never really end, do they? Just change shape, like fog rolling down the river. You think it's about love, or loss, or gold under the ice. But underneath, it's about presence. About something that refuses to stay gone. Every town's got a few of those stories. The ones people only tell when the wind's right. Cicely's no exception. Some say our ghosts wear snowshoes and carry lanterns. Others say they wear sunglasses and braid their hair. This next one's about a man like that. Someone who might be living memory, or maybe memory that just decided to live. I call this one the Skili of Cicely. Some towns have history. Cicely has memory. Not the kind you write down, the kind that hangs in the air. You feel it when the wind moves a certain way, like it's brushing against something that used to be here. There's a Dena'ina story that says some spirits live halfway between worlds. Not ghosts, not people, but something that keeps slipping between the two. We've got a man in town who fits that description better than I'd like to admit. Tommy Grass. Long braids down his back, green army jacket, sunglasses even at night. Smells faintly of wood smoke and river water. Doesn't talk much. Nobody remembers when Tommy showed up in Cicely. He's just always been here. Then one day, someone walking through the cemetery found a headstone with his name on it. No date, no inscription, just Tommy Grass. No one knows who carved it or when. The stone's been there as long as anyone can remember. That's when the story started. The ones that say Tommy's already buried. He just hasn't lain down yet. A few weeks back, a guy named Evan Hale came through town. Wilderness guide, cameraman, one of those people who can't see a mystery without pointing a lens at it. He was filming tour footage, rivers, trails, glaciers, and somewhere along the line, he met Maggie O'Connell. He stayed longer than planned. Evan heard about Tommy and that grave, and like most of us, he didn't quite believe it. Thought maybe it was a prank, a bit of small-town myth-making. So he started tailing Tommy around town, camera slung at his side. Said he was building a short piece called Living Legends. One evening, just before the fog rolled in, he followed Tommy past Ruth Ann's store and down toward the edge of town. Tommy never looked back, never spoke, just kept walking. Slow, steady, the kind of gait that doesn't leave tracks. Evan kept a half block behind him, filming in the mist. Tommy turned the corner near the old supply shed. Evan followed, and he was gone. No sound, no footprints, just an owl feather lying in the streetlight, still turning in the wind. Evan came back that night pale as frost. He told Maggie he'd followed Tommy down past Ruth Ann's store, that the man turned a corner and disappeared. Said there was just an owl feather lying there, still warm. Maggie told him to leave it be. Said some things don't want to be understood. He laughed, said he'd go back in the morning, maybe get a few shots in daylight. That was the last time anyone saw him. They found his parka and camera bag near the north edge of the cemetery. The ground by Tommy's headstone was soft, like something had been pressed there. A few owl feathers caught in the grass. Tommy's cabin door stood open, coffee still steaming on the table. Neither man was ever seen again. Maggie said she should have known. Said she'd add Evan to the list. The pilot, the trapper, and now the filmmaker. But she didn't sound angry, just quiet. Said Cicely keeps its mysteries, and it keeps the people who chase them. Maybe Tommy Grass was never a man the way we think of it. Maybe he was something older, the kind of story that needs a body now and then, just to remember how it feels. And maybe when Evan followed him into that fog, the world got thin enough for the trade to happen. So if you're walking home tonight and you see a man in a green jacket standing at the edge of the light, don't follow. Curiosity's a door, and sometimes the one who opens it doesn't get to close it. Funny thing about mysteries in a town like this, they don't just vanish when you stop looking. They settle into the soil, and after a while, they start to grow roots. Maybe that's how the world keeps its balance. A few people disappear, a few stories take their place. The Dena'ina have a word for it, for the space between endings and beginnings. It means the echo that remembers the sound. And if you listen long enough, you start to realize that the old stories never really stopped talking. We just got louder. Now and then, though, one of those old voices finds its way back into town. The kind that rides in on a storm, wrapped in snow and history. This next one goes all the way back, to before Cicely was Cicely, when the saloon in the center of town still had sawdust on the floor and blood in the cracks. It's a story about guilt and weather and something that still rides through every October. I call this one The Rider of the Veil. Before it was the brick, it was the bearded nail. And before there was whiskey on the shelves, there was blood on the floor. Cicely wasn't much then, just a mining stop with more ghosts than people. The bearded nail stood at the crossroads, serving whatever passed for courage in a bottle. One winter night, a traveler came through, a man the Tlingit called a walker between worlds, half shaman, half wanderer. His name was Tanuk. He came in from a storm, asking for food and fire. The miners, half drunk, half superstitious, laughed him out of the place, called him owl talker, said he brought bad luck. Someone shoved him, someone else threw a bottle. They tossed him into the snow. He didn't curse them. He just looked back through the doorway and said, "When the sky opens again, I'll ride with the wind." Then he was gone. I first heard that story from Holling. Said his grandfather kept a journal back when the brick was still the bearded nail. Pages full of snow reports, bar tabs, and one curious line. The rider seen again this night. He wrote it 3 years in a row. After that, nothing but weather. The rest, as Holling put it, is what the town remembers, or what it tells itself so it doesn't forget. The first sighting came a year after Tanuk vanished. Halloween night, a blizzard tearing through town. Inside the bearded nail, the lamps flickered, the wind howled, and then hooves. Slow, heavy, passing just beyond the door. Those who looked out said they saw a figure on horseback, wrapped in furs, face hidden. A pale blue light burned where his heart should have been. By spring, every man who'd thrown Tanuk out was dead, frozen, drowned, or simply gone. After that, no one in Sicily stepped outside on Halloween. They said if you heard hooves, you stayed quiet. If you saw the rider, you turned away. And if you locked eyes with him, he'd drag you behind his horse until the snow covered what was left. The story changed over time. Some said it was Tanuk himself, come to remind the living what they'd done. Others said it wasn't a man at all, just the storm wearing his shape. Either way, people learned to listen to the wind. By the time Sicily got its name, the fear had thinned in the folklore. The bearded nail became the brick, and whiskey replaced superstition. But the ground remembers. Hawing told me that some nights, long after closing, he's heard hooves moving past the windows, slow, steady, like someone tracing a road that isn't there anymore. Last week he found a horseshoe in the thaw behind the bar, rusted clean through, but still warm. Maybe the rider isn't here to punish anyone. Maybe he just rides through to remind us what built this place. Towns like ours, stitched together from hunger, snow, and someone else's mercy. We think we've tamed the wild. Maybe we've only asked it to wait. And once a year, when the veil thins and the wind comes down off the ridge, the wild remembers. You know, Halloween's got a long lineage. Before the costumes, before the candy, it was about the space between things, between harvest and winter, between life and whatever comes after. The Celts called it Samhain, the night when the veil between worlds grew thin enough for the old spirits to wander home. The Romans layered their own customs on top of it, honoring the dead, lighting candles to guide them through the dark. Then the Christians folded it into All Hallows Eve, different names, different prayers, but it's always been about remembering. Even here in Sicily, far from those old stones and shrines, you can still feel that echo. We tell stories. We light porch lanterns. We walk our dogs down the same foggy streets where miners, pilots, and ghosts once walked. And maybe we do it because the act of remembering is its own kind of protection. The Tlinkits say that when you speak of the dead, you wake them, gently. Not to haunt you, but to remind you they're still part of the song. Maybe that's what this night really is. Not a time for fear, but a moment for conversation between what was and what still is. Every culture's tried to define that mystery, to draw a line between the seen and the unseen. But here, under this sky, it's not necessarily ominous. It's just natural. Like the river freezing or the sun setting at 4 in the afternoon. So if you hear a knock tonight that isn't there, or catch a shape in the corner of your eye, don't be too quick to turn away. The world's just remembering you back. And that's all right. From KBHR in Cicely, Alaska, this is Chris in the morning, wishing you a quiet night and a happy Halloween, Cicely.